Thank you. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to move this important motion this morning. This House notes this year is the 50th anniversary of the establishment of the Adelaide Festival Centre, Australia's first major capital city arts venue, known as the Heart of the Arts in the festival state. This House commends the Adelaide Festival Centre and all who have supported it with their philanthropy, their volunteer efforts, their labour and creativity and their patronage over the last 50 years. That we recognise the extraordinary ongoing economic, educational and cultural contribution made by the Adelaide Festival Centre and its associated entities and activities over the last 50 years, today and into the future. And D, condemns the Malinowskis Labor government for dramatically cutting the Festival Centre's budget in its 50th anniversary year, despite its economic, educational and cultural contribution to this state. Sir, not 100 metres from where we stand in this building is an extraordinary piece of architecture, an extraordinary piece of the cultural firmament of South Australia, the Adelaide Festival Centre. It is the work of successive parliaments, successive premiers, the Playford and Hall governments, the Dunstan government, all have their hands very firmly on the foundation of this festival centre, which has stood for 50 years as the heart of the arts in South Australia. A centre where indeed world-renowned artists, singers, performers, actors have been able to play their trade and thrill and excite audiences from South Australia and beyond. It predates the Sydney Opera House. It is indeed a national leader in its work, and it is indeed also, as a result of decisions of the Wetherill government and the Marshall government, refreshed, able to once again, as it has before, present works in an appropriate modern environment. The Adelaide Festival itself has had world premieres of major plays, operas, and indeed examples of modern and traditional arts that are the envy of places around the world. And the work done by the Festival Centre, and I acknowledge in particular the leadership of Douglas Gautier AM, has had an impact on Adelaide's position as a UNESCO City of Music. It is an unusual set of circumstances that we are able to achieve our status as a UNESCO City of Music despite not having a concert hall. I suspect that we're probably the only UNESCO City of Music not to have one. And so a lot of that heavy lifting of performance at that elite level has been done over the years by the Adelaide Festival Centre, and the active engagement of the Adelaide Festival Centre, its board, its foundation and its executive team has no doubt put us in that position where we're able to do that. The work of the Festival Centre continues throughout the year, not just at festival time. Indeed, much of the significant levels of performance are long shows, both international and locally produced, but also the festivals that the Festival Centre is responsible for. We've got the AusAsia Festival coming up. It's a highlight of the year, sir, and I think that the number of members of Parliament, reflecting the number of members of our community who are looking forward to engaging in the AusAsia Festival, experiencing art and culture from our near neighbours in Southeast Asia and South Asia and East Asia, not only performances from those countries, performances from Australian artists of Asian heritage, and indeed collaborations between Australian artists and companies and Asian artists and companies. This is an exciting time of the year. This year we've got a particular focus on dance, on music, on visual arts, on theatre, and that is going to be a very exciting time. It's very important. There's also a number of other festivals, the Come Out Festival, as was, Dream Big as is now. There's nothing in the legislation saying that it has to stay the Dream Big Festival. I've put my 2 bits in for my fond memories of Come Out. That children's festival is an extraordinary thing. The Minister for Arts and I earlier this year heard 1,500 voices in the festival theatre singing together. And it was a very exciting moment for me. I think that it reminded me very much of things that I did when I was 8 or 9 years old, participating in Come Out. And those performances for our children, getting them excited in the theatre, getting them excited in arts, are really important in those children's developments as well. Because when young people are engaged enthusiastically in music, sir, it advantages them in their education generally. It also, performing arts are often the thing about school that can get some kids who aren't necessarily the most enthusiastic about STEM or sports to be enthusiastic about going to school on a daily basis, and are able to engage with the broader curriculum because of their particular enthusiasm for that subject. And so there's a number of performing arts companies in South Australia that do this important work of engaging with children and inspiring them a love of the arts. But I think the Festival Centre is particularly important in this space. Companies like Patch, like Windmill Theatre, those companies in South Australia that are so good at pitching their arts towards young viewers, those young audiences being able to go to the Space Theatre or the Playhouse, the Dunstan Playhouse as is now, or even on occasion the main theatre, that's a really exciting time for those children. To be able to participate where the way that it's set up is so effective at that. The Children's Arts Space upstairs at the Festival Theatre, another important initiative undertaken during the Marshall government's time, engages with schools and several times each year, often visual artists, working with schools that are able to then have their combined and collaborative works presented in that gallery space upstairs with the light. It's fantastic, and again inspires those young people to be engaged in the arts, which is good of itself, delightful in itself, and the benefits to their education is great. The member for Frome reminds me, the Primary Schools Music Festival kicks off in coming days. And the Primary Schools Music Festival, members of Parliament will be aware of this, but I know that the many people watching this telecast of the Hansard through their computers at home, some of them might not have had the opportunity to go to a Primary Schools Music Festival. The Department for Education leadership in this space is famous. It too celebrated, I think its 100th anniversary, or potentially an even larger anniversary, a couple of years ago. But it has been contributing through our public school system for over 100 years to our children's love of performance, their confidence, their collaboration, and particularly their interest in music. And when you have 700 or 800 voices on stage, all singing and dancing at once in their coloured T-shirts, their parents are proud, but it's an extraordinary experience for them. The Catholic Schools Music Festival always follows not too long after the Primary Schools Music Festival, and again, for our 100 Catholic schools around South Australia, it is a similarly important experience. All of those range of uses that the Festival Centre has had are to be celebrated. There aren't too many South Australians, sir, that haven't had some positive experience with our Festival Centre, even if they're not theatre buffs themselves, even if they're not people who go to the Adelaide Festival for performances, because it is such a diverse range of exercises. I went recently with one of my goddaughters to Mary Poppins, which is a substantial production. It's a worldwide production. It's a big budget production. And indeed, the Australian performers who are integrated into that opportunity were able to enjoy that amazing set, that amazing special effects and staging. I think that there's a pride that we can take in the way that our Festival Centre is able to engage with our community and put on productions for both mass appeal and indeed highbrow audiences, and do the same quality of work in either case. Festival Centre is a large operation, sir, has a significant budget, and it is supported every year by a substantial support from the state government. It does indeed run a very commercial operation. It seeks to maximise revenue that can then be reapplied into supporting the arts in South Australia, into expanding its offerings of festivals and engagements particularly. There's an outreach program through education to low SES schools, so that vulnerable students and children who might not otherwise easily be able to engage with the arts so successfully are able to have that access. It has a significant social agenda and support for equity opportunities and spreading those opportunities across our community. In and of itself also, I would say it also has a significant tourism driver. It is supportive of the economy, supportive of maximising South Australia's artistic economy and tourism opportunities there. Now, during the COVID pandemic, obviously there were dramatically reduced opportunities for live performance with audiences in South Australia. And that had a significant impact on the revenue that the Festival Centre and other performing arts, all artistic companies around Australia suffered badly during the pandemic. And the Marshall Liberal government again stepped in with support, significant support, early support compared to some states in 2020 in many ways, and then in 2021 significant support for the Festival Centre, understanding the significant challenges that were faced. And so there was extra supplementary funding provided by the Morrison and Marshall governments during the pandemic. So when we look at funding, comparing 2020 and 2021 with 2022, as I'm sure will be pointed out, is not comparing apples with apples. But the base funding grant itself was dramatically cut by the government in 2022 upon their coming to office. And it's a blunt instrument, an efficiency dividend, but it gets applied to some organisations more than others. And as one of the more significant beneficiaries of government support and government funding, the Festival Centre was the recipient of some of the more significant cuts. At the same time as their expenses are going up, the Malinowskis Labor government applied cuts. And it's worth noting that for many months I've raised with the Minister, and most recently I think in estimates, but possibly more recently than that even, the question of what support the government was going to give the what support the Malinowskis Labor government was going to give the Festival Centre in its 50th anniversary year. A year you would expect would be celebrated with significant extra work, significant extra performances, things that could mark this special occasion that is our 50th anniversary year of this institution that we should be celebrating. And I got back the answer yesterday to that question that was taken on notice during estimates from the Minister, who said an additional $200,000 has been provided to support the Festival Centre in its 50th year celebrations, to be used towards various celebration activities planned over the second half of the 2023 calendar year, a second half of that year that we are in. And I can only imagine how enthusiastically the executive team at the Festival Centre and all of the people working in the Festival Centre and all of the supporters and subscribers have had to that news. We've had a couple of performances, galas, highlighting South Australian artists during the 50th anniversary year. But the late application of this funding, such as it is, has, I think, dramatically curtailed what could have been an extraordinary year of celebrations. An opportunities missed to bring back headline artists who have featured in the Festival Centre over 5 decades. Opportunities to have really special shows of world class that could have been advertised worldwide to celebrate Adelaide, that tourism and economic opportunity that has been missed by the fact that we are in the second half of the 50th anniversary year before the government has been able to stump up anything at all for the Adelaide Festival Centre. It's an opportunity missed. And it's a real disappointment, and it pales into insignificance compared to the loss, which we've explored in estimates, we've explored in the Auditor General's report, and no matter which way you cut it, the Festival Centre has approaching $1 million less in its government support than it did before. I'm not comparing with the COVID boosts. I'm comparing the base funding level and what is effectively applied, and the increasing costs that the Festival Centre has applied. We're not seeing significant extra support and I don't think it even got the supplementation indexation. I think that was only for not-for-profits, which this wouldn't apply to. So there is, I think, a real onus on this government to have a look at the way that it looks at the arts in South Australia, the economic opportunities for tourism, the economic opportunities for, indeed, when we're trying to attract best and brightest. The government talks about attracting 100 of the world's top researchers to the new university. People of that nature, the sort of people who would lift the Adelaide University's ranking substantially, many of those are significant arts lovers, and it's of significant benefit to our state's economy to have a thriving artistic scene, our state's tourism market to have a thriving artistic scene, and inspiration for our creative young people in South Australia to have a thriving artistic scene. So far, although there's been some support for the Fringe, for some modest support for live music, there's been some support for the film festival and an annualisation of what was a usual grant of $1 million for the festival. Otherwise, this government has done very little for the arts, highlighted by these cuts to the festival centre, and I urge them to do better in the years ahead.